Sorry about that. It's taken me back to my COVID Zoom days, filling me with dread. So with our RE curriculum, as I said, we're on the topic of creation at the moment. So we start right back at the Old Testament. We look at the stories of creation, and we really, in RE in year 5, it's really getting children to make links. How does what we've learned in the Bible link to how we behave in our everyday life? So we're looking at how the creation story helps us to behave and look after God's creation in our own lives currently. Alongside those 6 topics that go right through the year, we also have other special times where we, in our RE lessons, where we might look at our class saint, which is Saint Joseph. We look at our class virtue, which is practical wisdom. So we've already done that at the beginning of the year. But then we have special days linked to the rosary, linked to harvest and things like that. So interspersed in with our RE curriculum are other special days where we highlight specific events in the Christian calendar. So moving on to English, the curriculum is quite heavy with English. So we've got lots of different parts to that. We've got our reading, which we do via our Vipers. So we'll look at that in a moment. Then we've got the element of SPAG, which is spelling, punctuation, grammar, and spellings in particular, which we're looking, which we've set up now, our new program called Spelling Shed. So I'll just go through that a little bit in a moment as well. And then all of those together lead into writing, which the children get lots of opportunities to write in lots of different genres throughout the year. So with our reading, we have a whole set of objectives that we teach through our what's called our reading Vipers. So the children each week have a text that the whole class reads together, and I'll read it and model it first, then they get to read in pairs and partners, and eventually a reading themselves then. So we read the text several times so they get to understand it and can pick it apart before we do any sort of comprehending with that. We play little games like fast finger first, so looking for different punctuation marks or looking for certain words and clarifying the meaning of those. And that enables the whole class to access the same reading material together. In our second Vipers lesson, we then look at retrieval questions and different types of questions related to that text. So that might be straightforward retrieval questions where they literally have to find in the text the answer and write it down. We have the more challenging aspect of that, which is making inferences. So where the children read something in the text, but then they have to infer from that. What does that text, what could that mean? How could we interpret it? So that might often link to something the character's done. What does that infer about what the character's like? So the children find that aspect of it a bit more challenging. We do some prediction questions in there as well. Then we do some questions that look at explaining. So why does that happen? Why did that character do that? Based on what they've read in the text. And then the other type of questions that we do are summarising. So what children often find, again, is a bit tricky, that when we're asked to summarise the main ideas of a paragraph, rather than copy the whole thing out, they've just got to put that into 2 or 3 sentences. And that's one that they need modelling and shown how to do. So with reading, often a lot of parents ask how they can help. So I've tried to instill to the children that reading is so important. So little and often, every day, if they can, reading their school reading books or reading books of their own, or reading, you know, if they've got like magazines or comics or the Week Junior or something, reading is in all different sort of contexts is really, really important. When they are reading, encourage your child to use intonation and read with the punctuation of the text. So if they're characters of different tone of voice, trying to use that. Reading with the punctuation, so stopping at full stops, using question marks, raising your voice at the end. All those things that we've been teaching them right from early age in Key Stage 1 is still vital up Key Stage 2 as well. Looking at their reading speed as well. So by the time they come to the end of Year 6, the texts are getting quite detailed. So they've got to have that speed to be able to read through or scan read what they're reading. So we don't want children just to race through a book and not understand something, but there is that element that within when you're reading with your children that you can give them that chance to read at speed and to give them, rather than interrupting them all the time to answer questions, do give them a chance to read a good section at speed, and then you could go back and maybe improve the intonation or the punctuation using that as well. Ask lots of questions. There's a lot of children that read words but they don't understand the meaning of them. So really question, do you understand everything that you've read? Is there any word you don't understand? What is the meaning of this word, that word? Shall we put it in a sentence? If need be, you know, if there's a word that you really don't understand the meaning of, get them to look at the dictionary. It's those sort of elements of picking that text apart that's really important. Discussing what characters are doing, finding synonyms. So which word in the paragraph is close to meaning that word? Can you find another word like it? So we did that one today in one of our Vipers. It was the word conquering. So we were asked to find a word that means achieving something. So they had to find conquering. So it's things like that where you can really pick apart the text. And that's where sort of there is an aspect of, if you read out loud to me while I'm cooking the tea, that's fine. But then maybe another time in the week where you do actually sit down with your child and pick a little bit, a couple of pages apart, so you're checking their understanding. Another aspect of our English curriculum is our SPAG and our spelling. So with the SPAG, we do SPAG every day in every English lesson as a little starter to our English lesson. So that might pick up on one aspect of these that I've got on the screen. So it could be looking at grammatical terms and word classes. So it might be looking at adjectives, adverbs, nouns, all those grammatical terms for different types of words, verbs, synonyms, antonyms, all those grammatical terms that we use for words. So if we throw them at children every day, they get to know what those words are. We look at functions of sentences. So those are commands. So where a sentence is asking you to stand up, or a function of a sentence could be a question. So we get them to identify questions. It could be an exclamation, you know, like, what a busy day I've had. It could be a statement, which is your basic, what you would probably call a sentence, your statements, just your classic sentence. We identify different parts of sentences. So looking at phrases and clauses within sentences. So they've got to understand the terms, what a main clause is, the part of the sentence that stands alone and makes sense. The other aspects of sentences that don't make sense on their own, those are called subordinate clauses. And they could be at the beginning of a sentence, in which case they're often fronted adverbials, but they could also be in the centre of sentences, which is an embedded clause. And an example of that is a relative clause. So don't get worried if I sounds like I'm talking a different language to you, but these are the sort of things that we're working with the children day in, day out, picking up on these SPAG elements that they will need when they come to do their exams at the end of Year 6, but also the way that we can talk about and they can work with sentences to improve them in their writing as well. We look at verb forms and tenses and consistency of our tenses. So if we're writing in the past tense, how do we make sure all our verbs are in the past tense? If we want to write something in the present tense, how do we identify that? So again, like today, we were looking at a diary together. They had to pick apart a diary that somebody had written, and we had to pick out what words showed us that the whole diary was written in the past tense. So they're doing this constantly in their lessons. We look at punctuation And we still pick up on punctuation that they've learnt in Key Stage 1 and they've learnt in Year 3 and Year 4, and that's embedded in Year 5 and used consistently before we introduce new punctuation as well. Vocabulary is a big one. We've been working on that recently as well, trying to get children to use sort of up-leveling their sentences so that sentences don't sound like Key Stage 1 sentences anymore. They've got up-leveled vocabulary in there. And that's where reading comes in, because the more they read, the more they're exposed to that valuable vocabulary and that up-leveled vocabulary that they can use in their writing. We also get children to look at the grammar of what they're writing and using standard English when we're writing formally, or we can use non-standard English when we're writing informally. So depending on the genre that we're writing, which form of English we use. Often another one that comes up with that one is that children think gonna is a word. I'm gonna go to the park tonight, and they write gonna in their writing, and it's making them pick out that standard English that it should be going to. So that's one that we often have to pick up on in Year 5, or using the correct could have instead of could of. That comes up lots in Year 5, being used incorrectly. So when we've put all of those bits together, we look at the children's writing. So this is what's expected at the end of Year 5 with regards to their writing. So writing for a range of purposes. So looking at different genres, writing narrative stories, but also diaries, also non-chronological reports, debates, discussions, explanations. There's lots of different types of writing that we teach the children to do. We expect them to organise their writing into paragraphs, so that builds on from what they've learned in Year 3 and Year 4. We expect them to be able to describe settings, characters, and create atmosphere in their writing. So we've been doing that last week, where we were writing a setting description about the top of Mount Everest. So we were trying to get the children to use expanded noun phrases, similes, metaphors, personification, and onomatopoeia. So we did that all last week. So the children are already being exposed to that element of their writing. Within our spelling work, we look at using a dictionary to check spelling of uncommon or more ambitious words, and likewise we use thesauruses as well. So if they've got a good word but it's not a Year 5 word, we can use a thesaurus to up-level that word. We use this builds on from our SPAG work. We use a range of clauses and we vary their position. So we embed fronted adverbials, which they've learned in Year 4. So that's where we adding that extra bit of information onto a sentence. So deep in the jungle, a roar erupted. So the fronted adverbial would be deep in the jungle, that extra bit of information saying where it was. New to Year 5 is looking at relative clauses. So we've not looked at these yet, but this is where that extra bit of information is embedded or added on to the end of a sentence. So Jamie, who was the king's hand, attacked the intruder. So that extra bit is who was the king's hand is adding extra information about Jamie. Again, new to Year 5 is looking at modal verbs. The children will already have been using these, but we pick them out and identify what a modal verb is. So that's the probability that something might, should, will, must, could, or would happen. And then we look at how we build on cohesion within our paragraph writing. So using coordinating conjunctions to join sentences together and subordinating conjunctions to extend our sentences. We look at using adverbials and looking at pronouns to avoid repetition. So rather than saying John all the time, we look at then how we could use he, kick the ball, my, and looking at those different pronouns as well. And we have to try in Year 5 to consistently use our tenses consistently and correctly through our writing. So lots there for the children within English to get to grips with. So at the beginning, sometimes they become a little bit overwhelmed and say, oh, it's a bit difficult. I've got to think about this, and this. But eventually we do it that often and that frequently, and it's modelled to them that they do get grips with it and they can embed that all into their writing. So here's just an example of what that might look like in their writing. So writing in paragraphs, fronted adverbials, using lots of range of punctuation that you can see in there, and up-leveling that vocabulary. So we've got lingered in the air, we've got idyllically peaceful, we've got despised. Okay, the devastating consequences, the disastrous decision, the calamity whirled around her like a blizzard. So lots of examples in there of up-leveling that vocabulary to an upper key stage 2 level. So how can you help with writing? So spelling, if children can spell confidently, that really can help them with their writing. So they haven't got to think about that aspect of it. So we've just started a new program of Spellshed. So getting children to regularly go on that each week helps them with spelling those year 5, 6 spelling patterns that we're teaching them and their common exception words. Saying that, if children do have difficulty with writing, then we do support them in class with that as well. So there are elements, we give children word banks, we give them sentence starters that they can use as well. So don't worry if you think your child's a poor speller, you can help them by using Spellshed and practicing those regularly. But if we know that the children have a difficulty with spelling, we support them within class. There's lots of different ways we can do that. Exposing your children to lots of different vocabulary. So again, through their reading, that really can help with their writing. If children are really turned off by reading, then listening to audiobooks as well, or listening to audiobooks that are beyond what if they're not reading at year 5 books yet, then being exposed to audiobooks of year 5 level of vocabulary, that can help them be exposed to that vocabulary, even if they cannot read that at the moment. Okay. So moving on to maths. Our maths curriculum involves mental maths, arithmetic, times tables, and our reasoning and problem solving, which we follow the White Rose maths curriculum for that. So mental maths we do every Monday. So there's a lesson every single Monday where the children are practicing just basic calculations of the 4 operations, so addition, subtraction, multiplication, and division. We look at squared numbers and cubed numbers, what they are. We look at finding percentages of amounts. We've not covered that yet, or decimals and fractions, but they feature a lot in the Year 5 curriculum. And once we've been exposed to those, then we do look at how we can retrieve those with quick, fast arithmetic calculations. And we look at multiplying and dividing by 10, 100, mentally as well, and 1,000. And we eventually look at doing that involving decimals as well. But at the moment, we've just looked at doing that with multiples of 10, 100, and 1,000. In the big red box, it's just telling you how important times tables are for their confidence and their speed in arithmetic lessons. So I know last year the children took part and do an arithmetic times tables test at the end of year 4. And then what we find is they've literally been on it so much in year 4, they get to year 5 and they don't go on TT Rockstars, they don't practice their times tables. And then their arithmetic of retrieving those times tables drops off. So it's really important that they keep practicing and maintaining their speed and their retrieval and their knowledge of their times tables facts, including their division facts as well. That comes up in multiplication, division, percentages, decimals, fractions, is all about times tables. And time and time we see children in year 5 that come to doing fractions and decimals and they understand it, but because their retrieval of their times tables isn't as quick, they struggle with it. So I can't stress enough early on in the year now to really keep on with those times tables. Lots of topics that we cover in our reasoning aspect of mathematics, which we cover with our Write White Rose. So we currently have just come to the end of number and place value, looking at numbers up to 1 million as well. So numbers, 6-digit numbers, being able to say those, understand the place values in each of those digits, and also rounding as well. We're moving on this week onto the 4 operations. We only briefly look at addition and subtraction because that builds on from year 4, but then we do spend quite a considerable time looking at multiplication and division. We have a huge section on fractions, decimals, and percentages, a small little topic looking at negative numbers, and then we look at all those extra topics that build on from our big number heavy topics as well. So geometry, which includes shape, position, direction, statistics, perimeter and area, converting units, which is another one that children often struggle with, going from meters to centimeters, millimeters to centimeters to meters, kilograms to grams. So again, you can pick up on that lots of times in the home as well. And then we have a small topic on volume at the end of the year as well. So other parts of the curriculum, we obviously don't just cover RE, maths and English. So in our science, we have 6 topics that are covered throughout the year. We are currently looking at forces. Then we move on to earth and space, properties of materials, changes of state, living things in their habitats, and animals, including humans. So that involves 2 aspects in our science lessons: the knowledge aspect, so the facts that they learn, but also we teach the children how to work scientifically. So they're looking at planning and carrying out experiments, looking at how we observe and look for patterns, how we record our results, and also how we derive conclusions from what we have, the results we've got. So lots of different aspects of our science, not just throwing facts at the children as well. Geography and history. So with our geography and history, we alternate teaching that each half term. So currently we're on geography. Next half term, we'll do our first topic of history. Then we'll go back to geography again. Then we'll go back to history, to geography, and to history. So we're looking at mountains at the moment, which the children are really enjoying, linking to their English work as well. Then we'll look at the Anglo-Saxons before Christmas. We'll go back to looking at volcanoes and earthquakes, which builds on what they've learnt in year 3, because they did cover volcanoes and earthquakes in year 3. So we'll build on for that. Then we look at a subject, Benin, which is African civilization that we look at. We have a European region at the end of the summer, and then we look at the Tudors right in the summer too. Other topics that we teach. So we've got art. Art in year 5 is taught by Mrs. Middleton on a Monday afternoon. So currently they're looking at cityscapes, doing lots of observational drawings, and looking at how we can draw buildings and add shade and tone to those. Then we look at people in motion, how we draw characters and figures moving. And then we have a topic study on Leonardo da Vinci. In DT, we look at fashion and textiles. That's leading up to Christmas. We do some sewing. Then we look at moving toys. And then we look at a food technology in the summer, which is baking bread. Computing, we have 6 different topics again. And currently we're looking at online safety, which is a real important one to start the year off with, how we keep children safe on their devices and working on iPads and computers in school as well. Our music curriculum, we follow a music program called Charanga. So the children follow a program in their classes, and then at the end of each half term, we have a music assembly that's just within school with each of the classes where we celebrate and perform an aspect that they've been learning on over that half term. Interspersed with that is obviously the Key Stage 2 Christmas Carol concert. So we spend a half term preparing for that. And then there are other times in the year Like Harvest, we're doing a song, so we're actually learning another song at the moment within our music lessons for that. So that's interspersed throughout the year, alongside our curriculum, our liturgical singing, which we do on a Monday morning with Mrs. Stowe to prepare the children for singing in masses and assemblies. Spanish again is taught by Mrs. Middleton. That's on a Monday afternoon as well. We look at 3 topics throughout the year, looking at conversational Spanish and vocabulary within those topics as well. And then personal development, again, that's taught by Mrs. Middleton on a Friday morning. And there's different elements to that. So there's our personal, social and health education programme. In the spring term, we look at the sex and relationship education. So that's done over 2 half terms. At the beginning of each half term, we look at what's called our Mind Mate. So that's a one-off lesson that looks at sort of how the children work together and work through problems and getting on together or making friends and things like that. Interspersed with that is our character education. That's our class virtues and our virtues that we have each week. So when we have the virtue award at the end of the week, that's looking for a child that has shown and demonstrated using their virtue throughout their daily time in school. So this week we're looking at thankfulness. So it might be a child who's using good manners, might be a child who's using their talents and thankful for the talents that they've been given. And interspersed throughout the year, we teach the children about the British values, sort of respect and democracy, and things like our school council and giving pupils their voice within school as well. So it is a busy time in school. So on top of that, and almost to finish, are some of the enrichment and trips that we do in year 5. So at the end of the summer, we go to Sheffield Manor Lodge to do a Tudor day, which the children really enjoy. It's very hands-on, making lots of things and learning what life was like in the Tudor times. We have our residential in March that I've already mentioned, Bikeability in February that I've already mentioned. And then we've got some experience days as well. So looking at a European country at the end of the summer, we're going to have a European day at school. So just within year 5, where we really bring to life everything that we've learned about that country. We've already had the Science Dome, where the big science dome came into school and the children were learning about their next science topic, which was Earth and space. Within that, they got to go in and we taught about that. There might be other trip days as well that come up. And also, if your child's involved in choir, we do the Young Voices. So we've got lots of year 5s who are involved in that. And we go to the Young Voices concert, which is in January. And then sometimes there are other opportunities, certainly, to get involved in music with the choir throughout the year as well. That's specific to choir, not specific to year 5. Okay, so that is an overview of the year 5 curriculum. So I just want to say thank you for attending. And if there are any questions, I'll stop sharing my screen. And if anyone wants to ask any, they can do. If not, you can leave the meeting. Thank you very much.